Hello again, Struck Co-op. Diablo 4's open beta tests are almost here and I felt motivated to make some pre-launch theory-crafted semi-builds that should be good for fresh into endgame characters when the game is here. I also plan to evolve those setups into fully fledged builds when the game launches, as well as keep them updated when we get rebalance updates and patches, so there will be version 2.0, 3.0 and so on as the game progresses of those builds. This is one such setup for the Barbarian class called Angry Berserker. The beta test will only let us reach level 25 and only let us play in the first act / zone fractured peaks. So those builds will be more useful and suitable for a player in the actual post-launch game, and ideally for characters around level 50 plus 60 plus. I've used 50-ish, 60-ish skill points for each of those pre-launch setups when making them instead of the full 100, so that they can be those setups can be used to jumpstart the player's post-story endgame journey grind. I've also made a spreadsheet for those builds as well as additional one, and this spreadsheet can be used to help you. It has shortlisted active and passive skills plus legendary aspects that work well and synergize with the build, and you can spend the extra skill points on the way to 100 on the things that you see in those spreadsheets, the passive skills that you see in those spreadsheets. There's alternative active skills if you don't want to use, for example, dual wield and you want to use two-handed. I've included alternative skills for those. And in general, it could just give you ideas what to level up past those predicted original skill points. As well as I've included enough legendary aspects so that if you can't find the best in SWAT, which I've listed, you have some alternatives and you can experiment with those, use them as fillers, temporary, or just make them permanent best in SWAT instead of the ones I've used if you feel like they are better. So I hope you enjoyed this, buckle up and let's go. Here we are at the skills segment section of the build video. As you can see, this setup in its current shape and form is using 66 points. There are things I would tell you that are not must-have early on. You can get them later. They're not needed while you're leveling as much. There are plenty of options. There are plenty of options such as I've included dual wielding because this is how I want to play this build is dual wielding, but I've included also a basic and a core skill option for two-handers that you might want to pick that also synergize for berserking. We want to be an angry berserker, but we can be one, whether it's dual wielding or two-handed, we have options. I've included some passives that I didn't put points into that could synergize with two-handed. I've put passives I didn't put points into because 66 points are invested. We have 34 points left, so we can fill in on the way to 100 the remaining ones in some of those suggestions. Overall, where you see this orange thing, it means it's an exclusive upgrade, so it means either one or the other, and not you cannot take both. Whereas with some of the passive skills, you can take both upgrades. I think this and this can both be taken. This and this can both be taken, even though it's one skill. And there's some interesting, unique things where, such as brute force. We'll talk about it in a moment. But overall, Berserking is a buff that gives you 25 increased damage and 30% movement speed. It's a barbarian unique mechanic. And this is the centerpiece that I'm building around. So, Frenzy. Very good dual wielding Fury generator. This is the obvious next enhancement, and this I picked Enhanced Battle Frenzy, dealing multiplicative increased damage while berserking. You have another option to gain multiplicative damage reduction for each stack of Frenzy you currently have. If you need survivability, sure, I'd rather do this one. But you have the option for survivability. If you take Lunging Strike, you need to use a two-handed weapon. And if you go Battle Lunging Strike, that requires a swashing weapon. But if you take Hammer of the Ancients, that requires a bludgeoning. So this will conflict with each other. This one requires a two-handed. I mean, it doesn't tell you to use a two-handed, You can use it with whatever weapon, but this one requires a swashing. And this one burgeoning. So if you go Wunging Strike, get combat, so you can combine it with Hammer of the Ancients, which requires a burgeoning. I'm gonna talk more about weapons and the arsenal system and all of that later on. And explain about the weapon types and how the barbarian is unique because they can have 4 weapons at the same time equipped, but only using the main one that is currently switched to as the main one, while the others are stat sticks. The next skill I've taken here is double swing, the next dual wielding skill. Our resource spender, the core skill. Enhanced double swing damages a stunt. If it damages a stunt or knockdown enemy, which there will be plenty of those for us to damage, you get Fury. Then casting double swing while berserking grants 2 additional seconds of berserking. If you need the duration, take it, otherwise put the point here. So that you cause its next cast within 3 seconds to deal increased damage. Pressure point, I like it. Your core skills, which in our case is double swing, have up to 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. Not sure if that's 10% per point or 10% with all 3 points or 5% per point, but still nice to have it. This one only useful if you go two-handed. No point to put it otherwise. Unless you're switching between one or the other. You can have a weird build where you use this one and then switch to that one, and just keep using them. And how the switching work? When you press a skill that uses another weapon, it automatically switches to that type of a weapon. From the way I understand it, unless you can manually switch to that one weapon, which would make sense to have such a system as well. Ground Stomp, our stunner. We have a Suki skill and then a stun follow-up. We'll talk about the stun in a moment, then get back to the Suki skill. So it stuns for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a great amount of time considering it's 16-second cooldown. Then the duration increases by 1 second, so already 4 seconds on a 16-second cooldown. So 1/4 of the cooldown is the duration of the stun, mind you. So this can generate Fury, but let's say we don't need Fury and we want this one. Reduces the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 1 second for each enemy damaged by Ground Stomp. So if you can damage 16 enemies, you already reset the cooldown immediately. There won't be many cases where you would damage 16 enemies unless you make a train, but then that would be very dangerous. But if you think you can handle it, do so. Then Imposing Presence, lovely, getting extra life. I think you want that early. And then damage reduction against elites, bosses, and players. Whether it's 2% per point, or 4% per point, or 4% when you have all 3 points, I don't know, but any damage reduction against elites and bosses would help. And this one even has the bonus against players, so there's that. Then you have Warcry, a shout skill. Mind you, I'm saying that because we have bonuses to shout skills we would talk about later. You and nearby allies deal 50 multiplicative increased damage for 10.4 seconds on a 25-second cooldown. And you also get Berserking for 3 seconds. And then Enhanced Warcry grants you this, so I'm assuming that this one here doesn't, this one probably shouldn't be here. Not sure. The information I found had it here as well as there. So maybe this one is actually that one and that one shouldn't be there. But in any case, you upgrade it, you get Berserking for 3 seconds. Now, if at least 4 enemies are nearby when Warcry is cast, its damage bonus is increased by 15%. I'll get back to this one and the stun and the Suki skill in a moment. Shout skill durations are increased by 30%, so that's from 10.4 seconds to over 13, close to 14 seconds. This is multiplicative though, so other sources of this would not work that greatly. It would not stack that greatly, but it's still nice to stack durations as much as you can. Shouts healing allies. It doesn't say healing you and allies, it says heal allies. If it heals you, even better, but I don't think it does. Guttural Guturo yell. Your shout skills cause enemies to deal 18% multiplicative less damage for 5 seconds. This is, I think, the solo option. This is the party option. So when you want to spend extra points, I think this one is a great thing to do for survivability. Again, a damage reduction while berserking. We will be berserking a lot of the time with that setup, so you want that maxed out. Hopefully it's 4% per point and not 2% per point or 4% with all 3 points. Battle Frenzy. When a brawling skill damages, brawling skills are those, such as Warcry. And this one doesn't damage, so you don't want this. You don't want this because this would not be doing damage. It says damages, and I don't think this could handle, this would work with Warcry. So that means you have that option. While Berserking Fury Generation is increased by 6 multiplicative. This is our option for this setup as a possible future upgrade with the remaining points from 66 to 200. Swiftness gives you movement speed. If you need it, put it in there. It's not an urgent thing, I think, but if you think you want that, definitely invest into it and maybe remove the points when you don't need it. Early in the game, movement speed would be whacking, but with berserking, not so much. Quick impulses reduce the duration of control impairing effects by 12% multiplicative. Again, good to have eventually later on, not a must-have right away. And here is our sucky vacuum skill. Skill Grasp. Skill Grasp has it has 2 charges apparently. I'm not sure if the 2 charges are because someone has spec'd here, but let's say it's base 2 charges. That would be, I'll show you one rotation. First of all, let's explain how it works. It pulls enemies, chains enemies, and pulls them in. And with this, it also makes them vulnerable. And with this one, if Steel Grasp damages an enemy, you gain Berserking for 2 seconds. If you need an additional charge, if this is not 2 charges, you might want to get this charge for the combo. So you have guaranteed 2 charges. Because we have plenty of other ways to gain Berserking, but let's have this one, for example, as initiator. Let's assume that those 2 charges are the base and this one is not needed for a 3rd charge. So you go there where the enemies are. Use Steel Grasp for sucky. And that gives you Berserking. Then you stun the enemies with Ground Stomp. And then you use Warcry. And then you use the sucky again, maybe, if you feel like it. That won't be bad. But there is another option. Steel Grasp, then Warcry, then Ground Stomp. Again, it's all up to you how to rotate this. I personally would do Steel Grasp, Warcry, Ground Stomp. Why so? Because this, if at least 4 enemies are nearby, when Warcry is cast, its damage bonus is increased. So you pull in a lot of enemies, at least 4, then you get Warcry to increase the damage, and then you have Ground Stomp, stunning and doing damage, and you start doing all your other things for damage too. And then you can do another Steel Grasp if the enemies start running away with the other charge. But this other charge would only work if you have 2 charges. If the base charge is 1, then you would need this one, and then you won't need that one, and there's that. But Steel Grasp makes enemies vulnerable, so it's good to start with it. You have guaranteed berserking and vulnerability with this one, without needing to worry about whether things would go your way. But the thing is, even if you don't have this berserking, you will get the berserking from Warcry. So no need to worry about it so much. Pit Fighter, a lovely skill. Multiplicative increased damage to close enemies, and there will be a lot of close enemies, and distant damage reduction. Then No Mercy, a lovely bonus multiplicative increased damage against immobilized, stunned, and swallowed, and you have plenty of those with this setup around you. Then increased damage against injured enemies. It could work, but I think it's easier for us to stun, swallow, and immobilize with this build rather than guarantee injuries. Exposed vulnerability is a good thing to consider upgrading later on into. when dealing direct damage with weapon mastery, which is Steel Grasp. It causes your next core skills, which was our, if you remember, Davos Swing, to make enemies vulnerable. We have other ways to make enemies vulnerable, so this is not super important. We have this one and other things. Thick Skin, each time you take the damage, gain Fortify. This is good if you want to focus more on the Fortify side of things. And then while fortified for over 50% of your max wife, you deal 5% multiplicative increased damage. If that's per point, it's good. This one's also nice. Damage reduction gained while you're fortified by additional 3%. Now, the ultimate, the build around me, the Angry Berserker, Wrath of the Berserker. Gain Berserking can unstoppable for 5 seconds, 60-second cooldown, by the way. For the next 10 seconds, dealing direct damage with basic skills grants you Berserking for 25 seconds. So even if you deal on the last second of those 10 seconds, you would still get the 25 duration. Then Supreme means while it's active, gain 20% increased movement speed on top of the movement speed from Berserker and increase Fury generation multiplicative. And then with the Prime upgrade, while Wrath of the Berserker is active, every 50 Fury spent increases Berserk's damage bonus by 25%. If you remember, it's 25% increased damage. And then that's 25% on the 25%. Not 25 plus 25, 25% times 25%. So you get 1/4 of the 25 as a bonus, which is 12.5. So you would have 37.5 damage with this and the other one, which is still super good amount of extra damage. And it can stack with other sources of damage multiplicatively later on. This is for when using bludgeoning weapons. And again, this is something that the game didn't explain, at least not the game, but online. I couldn't find information how dual wielding works. People are listing dual wielding as swashing, but they're mentioning dual wielding maces. And I'm assuming dual wielding maces would count as bludgeoning weapons. But let's assume that it's as people were saying online, and that dual wield is only counted as swashing. And let's say this won't work. Let's say this is just for two-handed weapons. I've put those if you go into build. If you're dual wielding, this one is good because it increases the attack speed of one-handed weapons. Good thing to invest into later on, not right away. But this one increases max fury by 3. Hopefully it's 3 per level, not 3 when at level 3. So there is this thing. It seems solid. Then there's those two upgrades. Each time you swap weapons, gain 2 fury. We're not going to be swapping much with this build, if at all. So that doesn't work for us. But this one heals you for 2% of your maximum life for each 100 fury spent. If you notice that you're spending a lot of fury, this is great. If you're not spending a lot, remove the points, put them elsewhere. And this is the specialization, unconstrained. Increase Berserk's maximum duration by 5 seconds. And increase its damage bonus by 25% multiplicative. So we had this 25 multiplicative, which made it 37.5. Now you have 37.5 times 25%. So you take 25% of the 37.5 and you get the extra bonus damage that gets added to that 37.5 altogether to get the total Berserk damage bonus. Although this one gives you for every 50% fury spent. So this one is permanent. You would always have the 37.5%, which is from this and the base. But this other one would keep growing and growing and growing multiplicatively for every 50 fury spent. So you want to spend as much fury as possible with this build. That's why Invigorating and Prime Rat work very well. This is a little longer because it's Barbarian. I have to explain a lot of things and I have to explain a lot more things. And I'm gonna do it right now in the next segment. Here we are at the segment where I talk about legendary powers. But before I do that, I need to explain the arsenal system of the Barbarian. Because people watching this video, most likely you're watching this around the launch of the game. And you haven't played the game and you need all the information you can get to know how things work. The Barbarian is unique. They can use 4 weapons. They can use a one-handed and off-hand dual-wielding combo. They can have one two-handed weapon and a second two-handed weapon equipped at all times. The one that they have currently switched to and are visually fighting which is not a stat stick. In my case, this would be the dual-wielding. The other two or three, depending, would be stat sticks. And there are various types of weapons. There's one-handed and two-handed. There's two-handed bludgeoning, two-handed swashing. As I mentioned, people were listing dual-wielding one-handed weapons as swashing only, but they're mentioning sword axes and maces. And my guess is that maces would count as bludgeoning rather than swashing, because I've seen skills that say bludgeoning or swashing, but they don't mention whether it's one-handed and two-handed. And it would make sense for swashing to be that way, but if bludgeoning can be only two-handed, it won't make sense for skills to just say bludgeoning rather than two-handed bludgeoning. So keep in mind, maces most likely will be bludgeoning, and the information that's online is wrong. So this means that with the Barbarian you have more legendary powers. Other classes have 10 legendary powers when one hand off hand, or 9 when using a two-hander. With this one you have the 10 with the dual wielding, and then you get extra 2 powers because the other ones are equipped and still count, apparently. Now I need to explain a little bit about legendary powers. You kill enemies, you loot stuff, and you can get legendary items. And those legendary items have a built-in power called legendary aspect. And there are 5 categories: defensive, offensive, mobility, utility, resource. And the same power can drop on any one of the item slots in that category. So mobility can be on boots and amulets. Resources can be on helmet, ring, and amulet. And now you can go to an NPC, take the power from one item, put it on another of the same category. So take the mobility power from boots, put it on amulet. Take the resource from a helm, put it on a ring. Or take the resource on a ring, put it on an amulet, and so on. Amulet has 50% increased effectiveness. Two-handed weapons have 100% increased effectiveness on the stuff, on the aspect. So if it gives you X, it will give you X plus 50 or X plus 100% in those cases of a bonus. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that you can get legendary powers from dungeons by finishing a specific dungeon, and specific power will be unlocked in a user interface called the Codex of Power. But that will unlock the bare minimum of the stats possible for that power. So in cases like, for example, let's find you this one where it's 40% to 50%. From the Codex of Power, you would always have the 40% version. But from a drop, from a monster or a chest or other loot type, you could get the maximum, up to the maximum. So this is a temporary shoving the middle finger RNG, showing you back into RNG's butthole. So it's a temporary patch up build mechanic. You go to the dungeon in the specific area, you finish it, you unlock that power, then you go to your Codex of Power, it is there. You go to the NPC that switches around aspects of power from one item to another, and there will be an option, instead of taking it from one item to another, to take it from the Codex and to use the version that's in your Codex. And that's how this works. Now that we've explained this, there are the best in SWAT things. If you just need the best in SWAT, this is all you need to know. Each SWAT, best in SWAT are those aspects. Here are the possible aspects, not out of all of them, out of my short list of 22. I have 10 class-specific shortlisted and another 12 universal that I've shortlisted. Here are a lot of comments. You can check the link in the description for this spreadsheet, as well as for the other spreadsheet where I have all the skills as a mini build calculator of a sort, where I have all the universal ones and all the barbarian legendary aspects and so on. You can check links for those. Here I have comments regarding each of the aspects, not each, but regarding some of the aspects, why I've included them in this shortlist. And the shortlist is there to give you options if you can get the one you want right away, if you haven't finished the dungeon where this one unlocks. You have alternatives that synergize still well with the build. Let's go through the stuff I've picked. I'm gonna start with the mobility. There's Wind Striker and Ghost Walker. Ghost Walker is strongly recommended here. We are not using leap, so means we don't have an escape mechanic, and this one would let you, when you're at 40% or less total life, to move through enemies and escape quickly. It's a lifesaver, and I think it's a must-have. Wind Striker gives you movement speed. If you'd rather have movement speed granted on crit strike, then sure, go ahead. But I wouldn't remove Ghost Walker myself for Wind Striker. There are two defensive ones that I've shortlisted: Numbing and Might. Numbing Rat. Each point of fury generated while at maximum fury grants Fortify. It's good to have that little bit of extra Fortify. This number here is X more like, so it scales with your life if I'm not mistaken. Whereas the other defensive is this one, Might. Basic skills grant you damage reduction. And I've used both of them. This one needs to be one of the two because pens can only have defensive. So if you want to sacrifice one of them, pick one, and then you can empty up a slot for utility over here. And we've taken two utility skills. Let's go and talk about them. Aspect of Shared Misery is great, and in most builds I put it in the amulet slot for the 50% effectiveness, but in this build I didn't. But I did put an option that you might want to put it there if you feel like it. Shared Misery is great. Here's what it does. Wookie Strike. When you hit a crowd controlled enemy, there's 30% chance to hit that for that crowd control effect to spread to another unaffected nearby enemy. So chance to stun to spread the stun from one enemy that you're hitting that is stunned to the others nearby. Sword enemy that you're hitting and so on. Same thing. A relentless berserker's aspect. The other utility, very good synergy for this build, must have power. Damaging an enemy with a core skill has up to X% chance to extend the duration of berserking by 1 second, double this duration if it was a crit strike. No need to explain why this is good for this build. Then for the resource generation, I've used 2 out of the 3 shortlisted. Umbro is great for all classes. Restore a resource when you crowd control an enemy, and it's good synergy with Shared Misery, because each time Shared Misery procs, you would get Umbro proccing as well. And each time you stun with the Stomp, you would get resource for each enemy stunned. It's just amazing overall. Now, Echoing Fury is a very interesting resource generation for the Barbarian. Your shout skill generates fury per second while active. We only have one shout skill, but that's more than enough. It has a good duration increase. We are taking the shout skill duration increase here. So this synergizes greatly with that passive for the increased duration. There is another option here, alternative, that I've included. You might consider using that early on, getting it from Fractured Peaks as a fewer, and then swapping it out later. Or if you remove one of those two and empty a room, then you can maybe move this one here and then put the Unrelenting Fury up there. This brings us to the good stuff, the red stuff, the offensive. You can see I've taken Pummeling, Expectant, Rapid Aspect, Retribution, and Edge Master. Edge Master and Retribution I put in two-handers. You might want to consider Pummeling in a two-hander as well, instead of the Amulet, if you want to put Shared Misery here, or if you want to put something else there. But Pummeling 50%, Retribution, Edge Master 100%. You can maybe put Edge Master 50%, put Pummeling here. Why? Because Pummeling and Retribution are extra bonuses damage to stunt. Pummeling is 40 to 50% multiplicative, whereas Retribution is 30% increased damage to stunned. Retribution also gives you a chance to stun far away enemies, which is good for you. So while you're killing nearby enemies, there's 15% chance to kill some mages or archers that are hitting you when they hit you. So then there's the Edge Master. Skills, all skills, deal Multiplicative increased damage based on available resource when cast, receiving the full benefit at full resource. And again, hopefully we've included enough resource generation for this to proc often. If you notice this doesn't proc often, definitely move it into the offhand and put pummeling here for the 100%, and maybe put expectant over there or something like that. And that brings us to expectant and rapid, which are also something pretty solid to consider for the build. Rapid is here. Basic skills gain attack speed. It's good. It's not must have, but if nothing better, why not use it? Alternatively, you can get a little bit more thorns bonuses, but you don't have much thorns with this build, so not that great of a synergy. Inner calm is good. Deal increased damage for each second you stand still. Not sure if there will be that much standing still, but if there is, definitely consider that one too. And there's expectant. Enemies hit with basic skills increase the damage of your next core skill. So enemies hit with frenzy increase the damage of double swing up to 50%. So you can build it up before doing the other one. So I've included separate options for Hammer of the Ancients, for Thorn synergies, for Bleeding synergies. And this one, if you take the Bleeding synergy, you want to take that one as well. There's some information here about this. Again, hopefully this is enough information. This would be useful when the game is launched, not as useful during the beta. I hope you've enjoyed it, and that's it for that category. To get notified when I upload more content like this one or other builds and guides for Wooter and not so Wooter games, you can subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on notifications. As well as keep in mind there's something called memberships on YouTube, which lets you be a paying member for my channel to get access to perks such as emotes and badges made by me, as well as the option to get one-on-one tutoring for the very basics of Adobe Photoshop, Premiere and After Effects. And memberships can be cancelled at any time if you no longer want to be a member. Thanks for watching all the way until the end, Struck Up. Keep it cool until next time, and goodbye.